This video is brought to you by Slate Black Industries. For grips and accessories, visit slateblackindustries.com.
Earth weapons. Take no offense, my friend, but your weapons are primitive by comparison.
I think a little demonstration is in order, don't you?
This weapon is called a P90. It carries a 50-round top-loading magazine of Teflon-coated ordnance with a cyclical rate of fire of 900 rounds per minute.
Actually, hold up a second. All right, step away. This is a weapon of terror. It's made to intimidate the enemy. This is a weapon of war. It's made to kill your enemy. I think a little demonstration is in order, don't you?
This weapon is called a P90. It carries a 50-round top-loading magazine of Teflon-coated ordnance with a cyclical rate of fire of 900 rounds per minute.
This is a weapon of war. It's made to kill your enemy.
It carries a 50-round
It's a weapon
top-loading
of
magazine
war.
of Teflon-coated
Made to
ordnance
kill
with a cyclical
your
rate of fire of
And
900
it's capable
rounds
of doing
per
so
minute.
effectively.
Weapons.
Earth weapons. Take no offense, my friend, but your weapons are primitive by comparison.
Henry. Stargate SG1.
You want to piss all the nerds off at once? We sense a disturbance on the Space Force.
Live long and prosper?
Live long and with the Force.
Oh my god. Alright, we're on at 150. Dead center, nice. Nice, another dead center.
Sweet.
Alright, 200, we're there. Okay, that was just at his head level on the right edge of the plate. So miss, high right.
Okay. Sorry, I was actually aiming high. I thought I was going to be more drop than that.
Impact. Impact, dead center.
Nice.
Alright, on at 250. 250. Ooh.
Okay, I'll put it back towards the center. Sorry, I was trying to, like, instinctively I know that it's not going very fast, so I keep on trying to bump it up to see where it's going.
Okay, got it. Just off the left edge.
Okay.
Elevation's still like pretty good. It's like basically like maybe 2 inches low. So splash on the left side. Okay, that was low on the right edge. Elevation's good. That was left by a quarter target. Dead center. There it is. That's it. Nice. Once you found it, dude, those are stacked up.
Nice. Okay, so now I'm using the ACSS's second dot to drop down, and it is holding off the right edge with about 5 miles an hour worth of wind.
Yeah, if that, right? Yeah. Yeah, 300, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna use the previous aiming dot and aim at the shoulder level.
All right, let's try it.
I can look at you right now.
Impact, left edge. Good elevation on the left edge of the plate. Just high over his left shoulder. Probably 3 inches higher than your last shot. Miss over the shoulder. Honestly, that could have been a hit, but I don't see any... gosh, I don't know, dude. That might have been a hit.
That was kind of a weird thing. I almost felt that I heard a hit, but I don't know if I did, right?
There's an extra, like there was, your first hit was like right here on the left
Yep.
side.
And then
I think
top
there's
left.
one, like right up here on the left side.
Yeah.
Okay. So you think that's it?
Give us one more. See if you can give us one more. But I saw a little bit of flex on the plate, but I don't see an obvious splash.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
So
That was high over his head. That was a hit.
okay.
I was
Yeah.
upper chest. Target.
Okay.
All right, I'm on at 350.
Okay, I'm gonna progress to the next aiming dot.
Think that came in just low. That sounded like a hit, but I don't see any splash. That's a hit. Right edge. Good elevation.
Why hello there. I've paused this video because I was busy in the field obviously reloading the firearm between the 20th and 29th cartridge of this particular feeding device. Now, this is a good opportunity to remind you that the History of Weapons in War app, which we are a part of, does not have any magazine restrictions, nor does it have any full auto restrictions, and so we can publish any video you want. Thank you to those out there who support us, amongst many of our colleagues in the academic world for firearms, including Forgotten Weapons, Bloke on the Range, Royal Armories, the Armorer's Bench, and more. For now, let's get back to the video.
Okay, so on the aiming dot on the ACSS, I'm on the very bottom dot. So the ACSS sighting system seems to correspond to a 300 meter graduation for an FN P90. I don't think it was designed that way, Josh, but it certainly seems to be a really good pairing with a P90 because 300 meters is probably the top zone of what you're looking at for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, clearly based on seeing zero splash on the target, I'm thinking we're probably well beyond where this thing is hitting its effective zone.
Well, you ready to take it to the moon?
Yeah, let's go to 400. That was a hit. I'm almost positive that was a hit. Lower quadrant, just right of center. Unknown. Hold. You got a deer that just walked in behind it.
Oh, great.
He's moving along.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like this is pretty close to the zone, though, right?
Oh, you're right around the target, for sure. Like, some of these could be hits, to be honest with you. All right, go ahead. Deer's gone. He went off to the left.
So in use, this is probably still like a suppression zone for this thing.
Well, yeah, like you can put area fire on, right?
Yeah.
That was just low. just off the left. Yeah, that one was... Yes, yes, yes! Dude, no, zero splash, impact, movement of the plate.
Yeah, but we could hear it.
Nice shot. All right, I'm there. Let's see what we can do.
Okay, great.
I think that was just it came in low, just around the base of the berm. Just underneath him, so close. Dude, was that a tink?
I don't know. Did you hear it?
I thought I might have, but I...
Okay, let me see.
Do you have anything left?
I'm out.
Ah,
I'm out.
alas.
I mean, are we asking a little bit too much for this little engine that could?
I mean, clearly.
Just a little bit. But I thought this is the first run that we're doing of the day. We absolutely front-loaded the hardest one to shoot. The P90, I don't think it was intended for 400 yard, 400 meter targets. Just a hunch.
I'll tell you what, when you were shooting it out at like out to 200, 250, even 300, like it took us a second to figure out where the holds were. But once we figured out the holds, you're able to get relatively repeatable hits inside of a 250 to 300 yard pocket.
I guess the idea is that, like, at least it has the sort of like a core accuracy.
Yeah, clearly.
That it could push out. I mean, it's such a small 40 grain projectile, but still, look, there's a lot to talk about the PDW story, the theory behind PDWs, and whether this is at all realistic. It's not. But within the realm of what it was designed for, if you had like 100 to 200 meter pocket, that's not bad at all.
Yeah. Well, especially with all of the compromises that you're making elsewhere for size and weight, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, or maximizations, I suppose. But
yeah,
let's cover that more off at the debrief.
See you guys there. Well, hello there. I was just enjoying the curves on these lovely Belgian ladies while I enjoyed a spot of breakfast. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Shows like this, they're brought on by Slate Black Industries. But more importantly, we've got the support of the patrons of Patreon. That's right, this magnificent group of men and women. They support us financially, intellectually, but most importantly, emotionally. So today I'd like to invite you. Come. Join us. Become one of us. Together, we'll discover the intricacies of small arms development. But if you can't, that's all right. We'd be just as happy to hear from you in the comments section below. But for now, let's get back to the show. So before we get into the full debrief, I wanted to talk about some cool movie trivia from the series Stargate.
With a cyclical rate of fire of 900 rounds per minute.
What you saw at the very opening was an adaptation of a very famous scene of Major Carter demonstrating the P90 to some alien forces. Now, I didn't realize this until I watched this part of the video, but they were using real P90 submachine guns. Well, PDWs, submachine guns. I knew this from as soon as I saw Major Carter fire the P90. I knew that it was actually a working submachine gun, or at least an adaptation of the working submachine gun, because, of course, the P90 uses a progressive trigger, and if you watch Major Carter shoot, and I'll show the reel right here. Notice that first shot. She puts it on fire, or full auto, and as she pulls it down, that first shot goes. And then it's almost like she hesitates on one single shot, releases a trigger, and then just jams the trigger down. That's a progressive trigger at work. What that means is, when you pull the trigger back on the first stage, it's actually a semi-auto firing sequence. And then as you continue to pull it down, it goes into the full auto firing sequence. Even though the P90 has a selector that has safe, 1, and auto on it, you can technically put it on auto and just work the progressive trigger to get a semi or an automatic selection. The AUG works in a very similar fashion. In fact, the P90's trigger pack is a very close copy to the AUG's trigger pack. And so it took that function of the AUG. And it's really interesting seeing it on Stargate, like a real firearm being used on the silver screen.
This uses a progressive trigger where a short pull will fire 1 round and a long pull will fire more. There. And then full auto if you keep pulling the trigger farther back.
Now, as far as why use the P90 instead of the MP5 in Stargate, the long form video, if you want that video, I'm happy to wait to make it with Josh. I'm happy to discuss the merits of a PDW versus a main rifle versus a submachine gun for utilization in a wormhole. But I think the idea is that they wanted something compact enough that was flexible enough to give them some type of a distance for short and long range while they were going through this wormhole, and they didn't know how much space that they had to work with. So I felt that the P90, of course, with its futuristic look, was a pretty apt choice. Of course, back then when they put it into the movie, this was the hotness. Nobody had any of these, and the armorer evidently had to specially get it from Belgium directly just to put onto the screen. But yeah, there's a whole story on how the armorer ended up getting it onto the screen, and it involved him bringing the P90 to meetings, and then by chance they asked him what was in the bag.
He thought we fabricated that out of nothing. I said, no, this is a real firearm. I said, we have 10 of them ready to go. And they're like...
But let's get back to the debrief. I'll see you over there.
Welcome into the debrief. Henry, the PDW course is not what we just shot with the PDW. But you were able to record hits with a P90 and a red dot out to... I think 450, right? You got a tag at 450, and that is just well beyond where this firearm is intended to be used.
Now, I will open this with the posted max effective range, and this is not the maximum range, the max effective range through what FN says is 200 meters, which we punched well beyond 400 meters. On this one. Well, right at the 400 meter mark, not well beyond.
Yep.
Well beyond the max effective range, however. But also, thank goodness for that big old fat boy magazine on top to make it out to 400 meters plus.
You did cheat. You did exceed 40 round count limitator that we put on ourselves on this course, but it all fit in one magazine. Standard capacity. Yes. Oh no, Henry, YouTube rules.
Whatever. Let's. I don't even know how to get into this because, like, lethality is not being tested here, but you can see if if the energetic movement of the plate is an indication, or lack thereof movement is an indication, the energy transferred is just abysmal.
Yeah.
However, according to tests, and these are NATO and FN's testing, at 200 meters, it can still penetrate level 3 armor.
That's pretty wild. I mean, granted, it's a little tiny needle coming at you, right? But yeah, that's still wild. I mean, to your initial question, like, how do we really frame the argument here? Is in many cases what we did is we pushed something well beyond its effective limit, right? We know that was the case. It's not designed to do this. We're not upset that it couldn't clear the course. Wait a minute. I'm very upset. I thought you were going to be able to do it. But we're not upset that it couldn't clear the course. This is in the same vein a la the Crink, the M1 carbine.
That's it. Impact.
So on and so forth, right? Like, those things are not designed to execute at these distances.
Impact. Not
What?
kidding.
I mean, yes, of course, my friend.
Yes.
Just from a raw accuracy potential standpoint, never mind the payload standpoint, which is the piece Henry has just referenced for you. I think this episode itself is really good to demonstrate what solid marksmanship fundamentals allow you to do, even with a platform that is reaching well beyond where it's meant to be going. What I would say from a spotting perspective here, Henry, to your point on the payload and like it not moving the plates, this was one of the harder spotting jobs I've had as of recent. I think
gotta be
I was
the
still
hardest.
able to like make a good number of decent calls on this. Though.
Yeah, you have. I mean, because the problem is,
That's a hit.
was there? I'm gonna go off on a limb and say there was literally no shockwave, no trace.
Very, very limited. I think it was really about trying to see movement downrange for a splash of the impact, and on some of the closer targets where the projectile wasn't arcing very much, I could see them zipping out fairly well because they were closer, and I was still able to sort of perceive them tracking out. I think you probably even see it on camera, to be honest, on maybe the 200 and 250s. Once you get beyond that, though, and we're having to start to arc these without the sort of wake behind the projectile, it was so hard to see them. I was really just reliant on where the splash was.
And it's really interesting because it is almost exactly at that 200 meter, 250 yard-ish range. All of a sudden, it's like you turn off the effectiveness of the cartridge in effective accuracy. But you brought up the M1 carbine, you brought up the Crink earlier. Obviously, those are shooting larger cartridges. The M1 carbine is something in between pistol and rifle, closer to pistol, but still more than a pistol. Now, we've recently actually had an opportunity to shoot both the P90 and the Crink indoors to see what the concussion is like, right? I would say, I was actually very impressed with the AKSU because for a full house rifle round with half of its barrel chopped off, very manageable on the concussion.
Agree completely. I was pleasantly surprised by how it performed indoors, especially stacked up against other setups of equivalent size, length, and caliber.
Yeah. So now, do you remember how the P90 felt?
I do. It felt like a pellet gun.
Yeah. It was even less concussion. Especially when you suppressed it. It was even less. Yes. Now, imagine either of those on automatic. With the lack of recoil. Yeah, you're shooting little needles into things, but you dump a good 5 or 8 into something, which is actually what SF guys were doing with the MP7 during the GWAT days. Dump 5 to 7 per target. Very, very quickly. The rate of fire of these things is actually quite high compared to your MP5s or other subguns. I don't know necessarily if I would say that this is my preference to substitute, but in that mode of operation, perhaps it's not as ineffective as people would say it would be. Certainly, out to 200, I felt that it was very, very easy to get on target, even with a red dot, no magnification.
Well, one thing that might be interesting, Henry, is to contrast this against, if you're shooting a 9mm of equivalent size, which would be what? A HK MP5K, right? A K model would probably be of equivalent size when fully extended.
This is a difficult one, right? Because you have to fully extend that thing to get the equivalent muzzle end. But
yes.
If you don't extend it, if you keep it collapsed...
Let's assume that it's in an extended configuration and you're trying to engage at range.
Yeah. The K is going to be significantly more difficult to engage 200. You can.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I've shot 300-400 too with a K. I know it sounds crazy. Josh looked at me like I was insane when I whipped out the K on the range. We have not recorded. I've just been screwing around whenever in between filming.
Practicing.
Impact, bottom right. Impact, head. Just off the right edge. Impact, head. Impact, chest. Impact, right edge.
I mean, 150 meters. Not terrible, eh?
But it works.
When the time comes for the K run.
I wouldn't even say that it works, but you can get it on the 200-meter target with iron sights too. You can get it on the 200-meter target. But the level of ease was a little bit more with the P90, especially using that ACSS primary arms, the Hollow Sun, with the bullet drop,
the brackets
compensation.
and the bullet drops. Yeah. 100% agree. So when you're looking at where this particular firearm excels, it's interesting to consider that it really is more of like a la the M1 carbine of the modern day in my mind, as opposed to the MP5K, which feels more like a defensive tool. Whereas like this feels like it could be implemented in more of a like just general use capacity, but on a shrunken course where you're prioritizing size, weight, maneuverability, and control. Because of course that thing is like so small you can basically one-hand it. It's so close into your body, and the weight disposition on it is such that you can one-hand it, and you're utilizing it within the course of the rest of your function, as opposed to having like an actual carbine that you're lugging around. That's much harder to do those tasks with.
Yeah,
and I think we've covered that, and you've talked extensively about it in the PDW NATO Trials video, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so a lot of times people contrast the ballistic, just purely look at the terminal ballistic and say that these things are useless. Not talking about armor penetration. Ballistic penetration is also lacking, without a better term. It's lacking compared to a rifle and even some pistol projectiles. However, if you're talking about not a special operations employment, but more so what you talked about, the traditional employment of a PDW, meaning your everyday soldier, armor crew, and stuff like that, where you are lugging it around every single day, which that is the original idea of it, was that it was for auxiliary people. It makes a lot of sense because it's so easy to lug around. Think about a medic if they're hoisting wounded soldiers at a CCP, or they're carrying like a litter. You could single hand that thing and still solve your problems between 1 to 200. Yeah, it could be a get off my back weapon, but at the same time, it's a pretty damn effective weapon in some of those instances. For an armor crew, it's really easy without any collapsing stocks to just strap it along the front of your chest as you're driving, and then as you bail out, you have it with you. It's a really interesting concept that I don't know if I would say we had a different focus in the GWAT era, which is why we never looked back at conventional use of weapon systems, and more we were looking at applying these PDWs towards special operations use. But that side of the conventional use for PDWs kind of just fell off the use spectrum. Even the Russians took the AKSU and started bolting things on it for Spetsnaz use instead of focusing on letting your armor crew or medics use those, because of course you have your AK-105 at that point for some of the other guys, but they don't get issued AK-105s at that level, unfortunately. So the PDW use, I feel like, as warfare nowadays is going from a counterinsurgency, a coin style operation, heavy focus on special operations only, and your conventional troops are using your M4s anyways, as we're refocusing on heavier mechanized troops running in tight quarters, running between a very dynamic situation, urban trench warfare type of things, I wonder if there's an implication or implementation for stuff like this if you could solve the ammunition logistics problem.
Yeah.
Because
look, I mean, that was like a very well thought out and put together professional assessment, Henry, but also Stargate.
P90. It's compact, lightweight, incredibly sturdy.
Because of course these things just explode giant pieces of swinging wood in the middle of the forest.
Yes, isn't it convenient that our rounds barely do anything?
Yeah.
Good.
So I mean, yeah, it's funny. It's funny that it's a weapon of war and not a weapon of terror. And in that video, the rounds do exactly what they do not do in real life, which is explode the target. But if we were to jump back to the boring bit, take away the ammunition logistics question, right? Standard loadout, 50 rounds on your magazine, carried in a tiny package. Can you imagine running trenches with that thing? If you had your ammunition carrying capacity figured out, because you need different ammo pouches for it.
Yeah, No, I mean, with that said, I can't really imagine running trenches with any gun.
First of all, I've only had a very minimal trench warfare training. We actually did have trench warfare training by the time we were leaving. Funny thing is, the hot thing when I was leaving in 2015 was, let's relook at conventional warfare because we see conventional warfare in the horizon. And the trench drills were actually still laughed at in 2015. Obviously, yeah, it's 2015. Afghanistan was still American, and I shouldn't say that. Afghanistan was still occupied by American forces, and trench warfare was a thing from 1917.
Yeah, 100 years ago, right? Yeah.
So
one thing that's interesting that I would say, given what we've been testing and messing around with the P90, as well as a number of other platforms, is that compactness. It is even, it is so short that you are really, really tight. And I am not an expert at any sort of CQB tactics at all. Let's be very clear about that. But I am somebody who is an expert, I think I can say that, at working a rifle in tight spaces, a la in and out of ports in a competition setting.
Right.
And the level of compactness of this particular setup, when you're holding it, you were demoing it to me the other day. It's shorter than a pistol presentation. It is like sucked back in so tight that you're so maneuverable in that space. It's pretty dramatic if you haven't actually messed with something like this before.
I would honestly go into a limb and say, I don't know if I should call this like a phone booth gun, because it's so sucked in. It's almost like if you were to shoot a pistol like this and still get hits out of 200. But then imagine if it's suppressed and then your pistol is still out here. And so a suppressed P90 is still the same length of a pistol. And that's a typical that's a typical length of like a submachine gun pushing all the way out. And so it's deceiving how I would say the P90 and the MP7, how short it is, because so much of it is tucked into the back of the system. It's got a lot of characteristics that people simply haven't really been focusing on and looking at. Maybe you could even extend that to things like the Flux Radar system and the BNT USC chassis.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. This is an interesting one because I think on its surface, like, this is not one of my personal favorite guns that you bring out. I'm kind of like, every time I see this one, or you're like, yes, we're shooting this, I'm like, I guess, okay. But it's still effective. Like, it does what it's trying to do, or at least it seems like it does many of the things that it's trying to do relatively well. I don't know how much, like the whole saga of the armor penetration that you outlined in that video on the NATO trials. Like, yes, like I'm not commenting on that. Put that aside. The construction and build of this particular setup, it seems like it does the things it's trying to do like really well. I just don't generally in my mind prioritize those things.
Well, right. I mean, because this is a shooting channel, and a lot of people, when they watch shows like this, they look for accuracy or terminal performance. Maybe to a lesser extent, they look for armor penetration, and people focus on things like that. But what people should also be looking at are the weapon's handling and performance characteristics. Is it reliable? Yes. Does it handle well in the certain dynamic environments that it was outlined to perform in? Very much so. You have a lot of things that it's very difficult for a system to be evaluated on shows like this, because a lot of those things come down to the daily use and daily handling.
We're so narrow on what we do, right? Like, as a shooting show, we narrow in on shooting.
But that's the thing.
It's like, that is this much. And
it really, you said the right thing earlier. It really should be looked into in the context of the M1 carbine versus the M1 Garand, the P90 versus name your NATO full-length rifle, which carbine, whether it's the FNC, AK5, M16, M4, say whichever one you want. And this is a smaller version of that for those troops who require this. And the interesting thing is the Germans, the Bundeswehr, their medics do carry MP7s. That's something that they do actually use. The Norwegians, their auxiliary personnel do have MP7s. That's not a special operations weapon system. The Belgians, however, they have some cops that use the P90, but this is very much more aligned with your special operations rather than those people who would take advantage of some of the compactness, the ease of handling, the robust nature of it. Because, like you said, there's really not much to break inside of it.
Yeah. Yep. Well, look, if people want to learn more about the P90, Henry, its development, its implementation, the development of the 5.7 round, for example, the video we've done previously, I've alluded to it several times here, both the classification of PDWs as well as the NATO Trials videos, and you can link them in maybe the pinned comment, for example, but these are the places to go where you have hashed this stuff out, like down to the nitty detail, looking at technical data packs and lots of specifics.
Well, the actual trial, I really delved into the actual trial documents, and I had a buddy over at NATO headquarters help me dig up in the archive some of the trial documents and some of the testing that they had done. One of the big red flags for the P90, I would say, that I saw right there, actually is less so on armor penetration. I think even when I made that video, I was too focused on armor penetration because everyone kept on saying, oh, it's there to defeat the Soviet paratroopers who are coming down with armor. Like, I don't necessarily know if that's the case. There was a thing with the P90, the casings are actually lubricated. They have a dry lubrication on the casings as they're manufactured. And you need that because they're straight wall casings going through the magazine that needs a straight wall casing to push it down. Now, when it turns into the little snail on the very top, it needs that lubrication to properly function. One of the tests that the P90 failed was a chemical soaking test where they soak the cartridges in JP8 or diesel. I forget which fuel. And when that happened, it failed to function in the firearm.
Because the lubrication was
dissolved,
removed.
Yes. And that is actually, I wouldn't say that happens a lot. I mean, out of my time in the Ordnance Corps, I have seen that particular scenario exactly 0 times, to where a PFC accidentally stored his ammunition in the JP8 canister. But in that instance, if it happens, then that's, I guess, an issue. Or that's also an issue for civilian reloaders who try to reload and clean the casings, right?
That's actually relevant, I guess, especially with the proliferation of some of the 5.7s that we've seen commercially, where it's becoming... there's some, I think PSA has some 5.7s that they're pushing out.
They've got the
that.
Rock.
It's becoming a little bit more.
They've got the Rock, the pistol that they have.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Smith & Wesson has one, the M&P that shoots 5.7.
Yep.
Ruger has their 5.7, and of course FN's always had their, I hate this, 5.7 with a capital F and capital N. 5,
yes,
7.
That's
it's
right.
Like, oh my
gosh,
but
like, in those instances, like those particular setups don't require the same lubrication, so you could see how some ammunition might not be, let's say, done correctly for P90.
Yeah, in fact, there are some defensive ammunition, Goau'ld, to be specific, that specify that it's not made for the P90 because I don't know if they don't have the lubrication on it. They decided to omit it because that is an extra step that's required to make that type of ammunition. I will say, a lot of people, if we were to take that initial conversation of 5.7 versus 4.6 to an extra level, I think the 5.7 has more of a civilian application than the 4.6. 5.7 is a .224 or 0.224 bore, so it's a 5.56 bore with a 5.7 cartridge chamber milled into it. That's what it is. Whereas 4.6 is a completely different bore size.
Makes sense.
I also think that the 4.6 is able to achieve better armor penetration, is because essentially if you look at the 4.6 AP round, it is essentially a carbide bit with a jacket on it. Like you are shooting the armor penetration piece into a target. Whereas the 5.7, it is an armor piercing tip with the rest of the jacket, rest of the guts of the projectile behind it. It is slightly larger, and so you have a little bit more meat to play with different projectile designs. Now, the interesting thing here is that because it is a direct blowback system, sort of, it is like a modified, slightly delayed blowback system if you really want to mince into it, because the barrel actually moves in the system very, very slightly, but the barrel moves a little bit to delay the extraction, so the chamber pressures are safe for extraction. If you look at the way the system works, it's very easy to develop a wide array of different types of ammunition for it to work with. So you have lighter or heavyweight ammunition, you have subsonics, you have supersonics, you have 40 grain VMAX, you have AP loads. There's a whole host of ammunition you could develop because it has a little bit more meat in it for you to play with. And then there's also been a lot of civilian companies that have developing things like copper spun projectiles, to where it's a solid copper projectile with a weak center bit, kind of like a Hornet's body. So when it goes out, that actually is able to penetrate armor much better at a longer distance. But once it goes in, it automatically fragments inside.
Oh, interesting.
So I personally think, and a good channel to look at this is Buffman. He's been doing a lot of presentations on the 5.7 cartridge. Matt has a lot of experience with trying out different types. And some of these more avant-garde designs haven't even been considered by FN because the P90 project is kind of like a passé thing. So the funny thing is FN developed all this for the NATO contract and developed a whole host of ammunition. Some of it useful, some of it may not be less useful for the civilian environment. But then the development really fell off. And as of the recent couple years, the civilian market started picking it up. Of course, I think it's easier to manufacture a firearm for 5.7 because the bore diameter is the same as 5.56. So then you end up with more of the civilian American side of the development with different projectile designs, with different firearm designs to adopt the cartridge into use. And in that sense, the cartridge itself seems to be carrying these legacy 5.7 systems. So I think it's an interesting lineage to where the P90 has gone. I don't see the P90 going through like a mod 1, mod 2, or whatever. It may not go away from FN's catalog just because 5.7 by 28 is prevalent now in the US civilian world. I would say you would probably find more 5.7 than 40 cal, hilariously enough. Sad, right? But yeah, I don't see any further development on the system from FN. However, it's interesting to see the civilian system in America continually designing aftermarket parts, which you do see on this one, being able to host different types of optics, being able to adapt to different types of technologies. And I wonder if the system will live because of the American aftermarket supply.
Only time will tell, sir. Only time will tell. Gang, if you're still with us, we appreciate you sticking out to the end of the video. Please do all of the good YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Join us over on Patreon. Hop into the private Discord. Chat with Henry about American logistical manufacturing of small arms and projectiles and the diameter of different bores.
I would say, ladies and gentlemen, and mostly gentlemen, because let's be real here, probably no ladies out there, unless you're a gentleman lady. If you've made it this far, tell me, if you are a GoldenEye enjoyer or if you are a Counter-Strike 1.6 enjoyer, what are your experiences in the battlefield with a P90? What is your most radical kill that you've made with a P90 in the virtual training world? Link your video down below. If we're able to get to it, and I really hope I can get to more P90 virtual training kills, that is video game kills, we'll rate it at 1 out of 10 if we see those video links pop up.
Rush B, no stop, Rush B.
Indeed.
All right, gang. Till next time, we'll see you on the range.
096, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green, top copy, over.
So 96, this